You think you're safe inside, but tonight, that's the last thing you should believe. I know how it sounds like some tired Halloween cliche, right? The kind of line you'd roll your eyes at while clutching a pumpkin spice latte, wrapped in a blanket, scrolling through your phone. But trust me, this isn't about cheap scares or ghost stories told around a campfire. This is something darker. Something that creeps in when the world feels warm and familiar, only to twist everything you thought you knew about safety and normalcy. I stumbled onto these stories by accident. Or maybe it was fate if you believe in that sort of thing. A few weeks ago, I was digging through some old message boards, the kind of forgotten corners of the internet where people share things they never say out loud. You know, the stuff that doesn't make it to the mainstream, the whispers beneath the noise. That's where I found them. 3 accounts, each more unsettling than the last, all tied together by a thread I couldn't ignore. A thread that pulled me deeper into a darkness I wasn't prepared for. What's strange is how these stories all start in places that feel safe: your backyard, your apartment, your favorite late-night radio show. Ordinary settings, the kind you'd never suspect could harbor something so wrong. It's that contrast that gets me every time. The way something so familiar can suddenly become a trap, a doorway to something you can't unsee or unhear. It's like the world itself is playing a cruel joke, lulling you into comfort before it pulls the rug out from under you. By the end of this, you'll wish you never heard these stories. But I promise you won't be able to look away. There's a kind of morbid curiosity that grips you, a fear of missing out on the truth no matter how terrifying it might be. And that's exactly what I want to talk about tonight. The truth hiding in the shadows of a cold October night. If you've been following my channel, you know I've shared some strange cases before, things that don't quite add up, stories that linger long after the video ends. This is different. These 3 tales are connected by something older, something that doesn't just want to scare you, it wants to get inside your head. And maybe, just maybe, it's already started. So, before we dive in, a quick warning. These aren't your typical Halloween stories. No jump scares, no cheap thrills. Just real people, real fear, and a darkness that doesn't care if you believe in it or not. And if you think you're safe, well, that's exactly what it wants you to think. Let's start with something that happened just last fall, to someone who thought they were just having a normal night. Because sometimes, the most ordinary nights are the ones you should never have stayed in. I never thought a simple camping trip could turn into something I'd never forget, or something I'd barely survive to tell. It started like any other fall weekend. Crisp air, golden leaves crunching underfoot, the smell of pine and damp earth mixing with the faint smoke from our campfire. My friends and I had picked a spot deep in the woods, far enough from the city to feel like we'd stepped into another world. The kind of place where the silence isn't empty, it's full of secrets. We arrived just before sunset, the sky painted in bruised purples and fiery oranges. The trees stood tall and proud, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. I remember thinking how perfect it was for a night away from screens and noise. We set up our tents, cracked open some beers, and laughed around the fire, telling stories that felt harmless in the warm glow of the flames. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked suddenly, her voice low. She was staring into the dark woods beyond the firelight. "Hear what?" I said, trying to sound casual, but my heart skipped a beat. "That whispering," she said. "Like someone's talking, but no one's there." I laughed it off. Probably just the wind messing with your ears. But the truth is, I heard it too. At first, it was faint, like a soft murmur carried on the breeze. Then it grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't the wind. It was voices, whispering, almost like the trees themselves were speaking, but in a language I couldn't understand. They say if you listen closely, the woods don't just whisper, they remember. I told the group, trying to sound like I wasn't getting creeped out. It was something I'd read once on a forum about strange disappearances in the area. People claimed the forest held memories of those who'd passed through, and sometimes those memories spoke back. "Great," Mark said, rolling his eyes. "Now we're haunted by chatty trees." We all laughed, but the laughter felt hollow. The fire flickered, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts around us. The woods seemed to close in, the darkness thickening with every passing minute. Later, when the fire died down and the others retreated to their tents, I stayed out a little longer, staring into the blackness. That's when I noticed the whispers weren't random, they were patterns, almost like a chant. I strained to catch the words, but they slipped through my mind like smoke. Suddenly, A cold breeze swept through the clearing, and the whispers stopped. The silence that followed was worse, heavy, expectant, like the forest was holding its breath. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the night. No answer, just the rustling of leaves. Moving into the city was supposed to be a fresh start. New job, new apartment, new life. I found a place in an old building downtown, one of those brick-and-mortar relics with creaky floors and peeling paint that somehow still felt charming. The kind of place where the neighbors know your name, and the landlord is a grumpy old man who's seen it all. At least, that's what I thought. The first few days were typical: unpacking boxes, figuring out the bus routes, and trying not to get lost in the maze of hallways. The building had character, sure, but it also had quirks. Like the strange smell that lingered in the stairwell, something like damp wood mixed with old smoke. Or the way the lights flickered in the hallway at exactly 3:07 a.m. every night. I joked about it with my neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, who lived across the hall. "Old buildings have their moods," she said with a wink. "You get used to it." But then there was the door. It was at the end of the hall, past the laundry room. A heavy, rusted metal door with no handle, just a small, barred window at eye level. The landlord called it the Forgotten Room and refused to talk about it. When I asked him why it was locked, he just grunted and said, "Some things are better left alone." That only made me more curious. I started digging through old tenant records and online forums, hoping to find some clue. That's when I found it. A thread buried deep in a creepy urban legends forum, titled "The Forgotten Room of 7th Street." The posts were sparse, cryptic, and full of warnings. "No one talks about what's behind that door," one user wrote, "and those who do disappear." I laughed nervously, telling myself it was just internet paranoia. But the more I read, the more I realized this wasn't just a story. There were reports of strange noises, whispers, footsteps, even screams, coming from that locked room. Tenants who moved in and out suddenly, some vanishing without a trace. The building's history was murky, with rumors of occult rituals and secret societies dating back decades. One entry caught my eye. It was a diary excerpt from a tenant named Evelyn, who lived here in the 1970s. She wrote about hearing voices behind the door, voices that called her name and promised things she couldn't refuse. Her last entry was cut off mid-sentence, ending with, "They're coming for me. I don't know how much longer I can." I showed the posts to Mrs. Callahan, hoping for some reassurance. Instead, she just shook her head. "People don't like to talk about it," she said quietly. "The landlord's right. Some doors should stay closed." One night, I heard it for myself. I was coming home late when I passed the door and caught a faint sound, like a low hum, almost musical, but twisted. I stopped, heart pounding, and pressed my ear against the cold metal. The sound stopped instantly. I stepped back, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. The next day, I confronted the landlord. "Why won't you open it?" I asked. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Because whatever's in there doesn't belong to this world. And if you open it, you won't like what you find." I wanted to laugh, but his eyes were dead serious. That night, I couldn't sleep. The building felt alive, like it was breathing around me. I kept hearing whispers, soft and urgent, coming from the direction of the Forgotten Room. I swear I even saw shadows moving behind the barred window. I started recording everything. Audio, video, even notes, trying to capture proof. But every time I played back the recordings, the whispers were gone, like the building was hiding its secrets from me. Then, one morning, I woke up to find a note slipped under my door. No signature, just 3 words, "Don't open it. I'm still here, but I don't know for how long." The landlord's warnings echo in my mind, and the stories from the forums haunt my every step. This one's been whispered about in the community for years, but no one dared to share the full story. Until now. If you ever find yourself in an old building with a locked door that no one talks about, maybe take the hint. Some doors aren't just forgotten. They're sealed for a reason. If you think that's creepy, the last story will make you question everything you believe about reality. There's something about late-night radio that feels like a lifeline in the dark. The steady hum of the signal, the familiar voice crackling through the static. It's comfort when the world outside feels cold and empty. I used to be that voice. For years, I hosted a small, late-night show on a local station, the kind of program where people called in with their stories, their fears, their secrets. It was harmless, or so I thought. It started like any other night. The clock hit midnight, and I settled into my chair, the microphone warm against my lips. The usual callers trickled in. Lonely souls, pranksters, conspiracy theorists. I'd joke with them, keep things light. You're not alone out there, I'd say, half meaning it. The night was my domain, a place where the weird and the mundane collided. Then the call came. The line was dead silent at first, just a faint crackle. Then a voice, low and distorted, whispered, "Do you hear it? The signal's breaking." I leaned in, curiosity piqued. "Breaking? What do you mean?" Static hissed, then the voice said, "They're coming through. The ones beyond the airwaves." I laughed nervously. "Okay, buddy, what's this? Some kind of prank?" But the caller didn't respond. Instead, the background noise shifted. An eerie, almost musical hum that sent a chill down my spine. I glanced at the soundboard. The levels were spiking, but there was no obvious source. "Is this a joke?" I asked again, trying to keep my voice steady. The voice returned, clearer this time, but still strange. "You can't stop it. It's already inside." The line went dead. I tried to shake it off, but the broadcast started to change. The music warped, the static grew louder, and my own voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. Listeners called in, confused, reporting strange noises on their end. Whispers, clicks, even voices speaking languages no one recognized. I remember one caller, a woman named Lisa, who said, "It's like the radio's alive, like it's trying to tell us something." I wanted to believe it was just interference, a technical glitch. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The station's engineers found nothing. The equipment was fine, yet the broadcast kept spiraling into madness. One night, during a particularly intense segment, I heard it. Something beneath the static, a voice that wasn't mine, speaking directly to me. "Look beyond the signal," it said. "Find the source." I started digging, pulling old tapes, archives, anything that might explain the phenomenon. That's when I found it. A recording from decades ago, a broadcast that ended abruptly with the host screaming before the signal cut out completely. The station's history was riddled with disappearances and strange incidents, all tied to this late-night slot. They say if you listen to the last broadcast, you'll hear something no one was meant to hear. A message from beyond, a warning, or a curse. I don't know what I heard that night, but it changed me. The line between reality and madness blurred. I started seeing shadows in the studio, hearing whispers when no one was there. The broadcast became a conduit for something else, something ancient and hungry. I'm telling you this now because the signal never really died. It's still out there, waiting for the next host, the next listener, maybe even you. If you think you're safe, think again. This isn't just a story, it's a warning. The darkness isn't confined to the woods or forgotten rooms. It's in the airwaves, in the static between words, in the silence after the broadcast ends. And if you listen closely, you might just hear it calling your name. So what happens next? Well, that's the question, isn't it? Because the night never really ends. It just waits for someone to stay in it too long. Remember what I said at the start. You think you're safe inside. But sometimes, the most ordinary nights are the ones you should never have stayed in. If you're still here, if you're still listening, maybe it's already too late. So here we are. 3 stories, 3 glimpses into the shadows that creep just beyond the edges of our everyday lives. The woods that whisper secrets you don't want to hear. The forgotten room that no one dares to open. And the broadcast that never truly ends, echoing through the static like a ghost trapped in the airwaves. Each one feels separate, but they're tied together by something deeper. A darkness that doesn't care about your comfort or your disbelief. It's funny, isn't it? How we lock our doors, pull the curtains tight, and tell ourselves we're safe. But safety is just a fragile illusion. The real terror isn't in the monsters under the bed or the shadows in the closet. It's in the quiet moments when you realize the world you thought you knew is full of things you can explain. Things that watch, wait, and sometimes reach in. I've shared a lot with you over time. Cases, theories, warnings. And yet, there are things I still can't explain. Things I'm not sure I want to. Because some knowledge comes with a price. And once you see the cracks in the world's surface, it's hard to pretend they're not there. That's why I want to hear from you. What do you think connects these stories? Have you ever felt the kind of dread that lingers long after the lights go out? Share your thoughts, your own experiences, your theories in the comments. This community, our little corner of the internet, is where the whispers become a conversation, where the unknown becomes a shared mystery. If you're new here, consider subscribing. There's more coming. More stories, more secrets, and maybe just maybe, some answers. But be warned, once you start looking, it's hard to stop. The night never really ends. It just waits for you to stay in it too long. And remember what I said at the very beginning. You think you're safe inside. But sometimes, the most ordinary nights are the ones you should never have stayed in. So, before you turn off the lights tonight, listen closely. Because the night is full of things that don't want to be forgotten. And if you hear a whisper, don't ignore it. It might be trying to tell you something. Or maybe it's just waiting for you. Good night, and stay safe. Or at least, try to.